He knows the Libra, who withdraws from the family. It's not the silence that hurts first. It's the upbringing, that gentle, almost kind way of gradually disappearing without arguing, without giving a reason that fits into a whole sentence. You must have seen this up close, or felt it yourself. A Libra who used to call every Sunday and, without any warning, the Sundays started becoming less frequent. A Libra who was always the one who resolved arguments at the dinner table and who one day simply stopped sitting at that table. We've learned to think that this is coldness, that it's pride, that it's that reputation of being fickle, changing companions like changing clothes. But what if the most obvious explanation is exactly the wrong one? What if the separation doesn't stem from detachment, but rather from an attachment so strong that it's become too heavy to bear alone? Because there's a pattern that quietly repeats itself in almost every Libra who has ever distanced themselves from someone they love. Before leaving, they tried. They tried too hard. They tried for years. They were the son who never disagreed loudly, the brother who gave up his seat, the grandson who softened every crisis just by entering the room. They learned early, too early, that the love of their own home came at a price, keeping everything standing, even when inside they were crumbling. And nobody asked what it cost. There's a name for this kind of role within a family, but almost no one ever uses that word. It's called outsourced emotional regulation. Simply put, a child or a teenager who becomes the emotional thermostat for the adults around them. When the house gets too hot, they're the ones who lower the temperature. When the silence is too heavy, they're the ones who fill the void with a joke, a gesture, a bridge. And the problem with growing up being the thermostat for other people's homes is that sooner or later, your own thermometer stops working. You've probably seen an adult Libra who can't quite put their feelings into words, who smiles even in the middle of disappointment, who changes the subject when the conversation gets too uncomfortable. This didn't come out of nowhere. It was practiced, repeated, even praised at every family dinner where they were the one who always solves everything. And that's exactly where the first crack appears, because one day the body gets tired of pretending to be balanced, and what the family calls distance is often the first time that Libra has stopped regulating other people's feelings to finally try to feel their own. But that's just the surface, because there's a second, deeper layer that's almost never spoken aloud. Librans don't just distance themselves from those who hurt them. Sometimes they distance themselves from those who simply can't see what they carry inside. And that hurts in a different way. It hurts because there's no villain to point the finger at, no fight to remember, no set date when everything changed. There's only an accumulated, silent weariness that one day crosses an invisible boundary and becomes a decision. There are entire families who never realized that they had raised someone within their own home, trained to smile through their own pain. And the strangest thing is that this training didn't always come from shouting or visible crises. Sometimes it came from small things, from a "don't exaggerate" said with affection, from a "you're strong, you can handle it" repeated as a compliment, from an expectation never spoken but always felt that there, in that house, the one who brought peace couldn't also bring burden. What if that were only the first of 5 reasons hidden behind that polite silence that no one, not even within the family itself, can properly name? If you've come this far recognizing something of this in yourself or in someone you love, you might already be feeling that nagging question taking shape. And now, what do I do with what I've just realized? It was while seeking answers to these reflections that the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help the Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, was born. More than just a simple read, it brings together teachings, interpretations, and exercises to help you understand patterns, develop a more conscious attitude, and cultivate a stronger mindset in the face of difficulties. For those who carry the burden of maintaining balance for others, this material functions less like a book and more like a mirror, a way to learn to distribute inward the same harmony you've always known how to distribute outward. It's not about fixing anyone. It's about stopping getting lost in the search for a balance that was never solely yours to maintain alone. You're probably still processing what you just heard. That's normal, and that's exactly why now is the right time to act, not in a week when that discomfort has already been buried under the rug again. Access to the digital book is available in the first pinned comment. The link is in the first pinned comment. This access is for a limited time only. Click now and download your copy. And before we continue, tell me in the comments, when was the last time you sacrificed your own peace to maintain the peace of someone in your family? Think about this while we continue, because the second reason for this estrangement is even harder to admit than the first. There's a moment, usually in adulthood, when Librans realize something unsettling. They know exactly what others need to be at peace, but have no idea what they themselves need. Ask a Libran what their sibling likes, what calms their mother, what prevents arguments at their birthday party. They'll answer immediately, in detail. Ask them what they truly feel about their own family, and there's that long silence, almost a blank. This isn't a lack of emotional intelligence, it's the opposite. It's an entire body of emotional intelligence dedicated to mapping others, because from an early age, learning about others was a way to guarantee a safe place at home. And every time there was enough attention to look inward, a silent, almost automatic guilt would arise. Do I have the right to feel this way when everyone around me is already doing well? This is where the second reason lies. Librans withdraw because, when close to their family, they forget to exist as individuals. They revert to their function. They become the peacemaker, the organizer, the one who holds things together. And the more years pass, the more they realize that maintaining close contact means once again disappearing within that role. The distance, in this case, is not an escape from family. It's an attempt to continue existing as a whole person, outside the character he was trained to play so well. And there's something curious about this process. The longer the Libra spends away, the more they begin to notice how much space that character occupied within them. It's like taking off a tight shoe after years of wearing it without realizing how much it hurt. At first, the relief comes mixed with guilt. Then, it comes mixed with a new, almost frightening question. Who am I when I don't have to solve anything for anyone? And there's a third layer, even more silent: disappointment. Not the loud disappointment, not the kind that leads to a nasty fight at a holiday party. The quiet disappointment of someone who spent their entire childhood believing that if they could keep everything in harmony, one day the whole family would reciprocate that same care. And they didn't. Librans grow up expecting emotional reciprocity. They learn early on to read between the lines, to anticipate needs, to soften things even before conflict arises. And what they silently hope for is that someday someone will do the same for them. When that doesn't happen, and it almost never does, because nobody asked to learn this language, they don't give up with a speech. They give up slowly, with fewer calls, with shorter answers, with a distance that even their own family takes a while to notice. Because, after all, they've always been so discreet even in that. But why the withdrawal and not a direct conversation? Why does the Libra, so good with words, so skilled at explaining other people's feelings, choose silence precisely when the subject is their own pain at home? Here is the fourth reason, and perhaps the most painful of all. Librans have an almost physical fear of irreversible confrontation. They have already lived through or witnessed firsthand the damage that a poorly resolved argument can leave in a family. And, at some point, they learned a simple equation. Saying everything can break something that might still be salvageable in silence. So he doesn't confront. He retreats. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, he shrinks the space he occupies within the family dynamic. Less opinion in discussions, less presence in messaging groups, less willingness to mediate the next crisis. It's not indifference. It's a desperate attempt to protect the bond, avoiding the only path he fears could destroy it once and for all, the truth spoken without filter. The problem is that this strategy comes at a high cost, because while he avoids the painful conversation, the distance grows on its own, without anyone consciously deciding to do so. And a day comes when he looks back and realizes that he spent years avoiding a 5-minute confrontation and traded that for years of estrangement. It's ironic, almost cruel. The sign that understands justice best, balance, and giving each side its due weight is the same one that avoids applying that same justice to its own emotional life. It weighs the feelings of others with surgical precision and leaves its own piled up, never stepping on the scales. And perhaps it is precisely at this moment that, hearing this, you recognize something in yourself that you never had words to describe. This scale that weighs everything from others and forgets to weigh its own weight is perhaps the most silent and tiring part of carrying such a sign. And that's exactly what the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help the Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, is about. There, among the teachings and practical exercises, is a path designed for those who constantly judge their own right to feel, comparing their pain to that of others until they convince themselves that theirs doesn't matter that much. It's about learning to weigh yourself without guilt, without asking permission. This access condition is not available indefinitely. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last spots for this special offer are closing soon. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. There's a fifth reason, and it's not about resentment. It's about growth, and how sometimes growing hurts more than any fight. Family, for most people, is the place where roles are frozen in time. You can be 40 years old, have built a whole life away from home, and yet, at the Christmas table, someone treats you like the confused teenager you stopped being a long time ago. For any sign, this would be uncomfortable. For a Libra, who builds their identity precisely through the reflection they receive from the world around them, this is almost unbearable. Because Librans don't discover who they are alone, locked in a room, staring at the ceiling. They discover who they are through contact, in mirrors, in relationships, and if the only available mirror insists on showing an old, frozen version of who they were at 15, they instinctively begin to look for other mirrors, new friendships, new environments, people who only knew the current version without the weight of the whole history. It's not betrayal of the family, it's survival of identity, because being trapped in a mirror that shows the same old image day after day, year after year, is a slow way to lose yourself. And here lies perhaps the most beautiful and painful contradiction of all. The same Libra who distances himself to protect who he has become is the same one who carries, somewhere, an enormous longing for the family that was once his first mirror. He doesn't want to break away. He just doesn't know how to return without losing again everything he spent years building outside those walls. And it is precisely here, in the midst of these 5 reasons, that the paradox appears, which astrology and psychology together mercilessly expose. The more a Libra seeks balance in the outside world, the more unbalanced they become inside. He builds harmony in every environment he enters. At work, he solves problems. In friendships, he mediates. In relationships, he adapts. And curiously, it is precisely this extraordinary ability to bring peace to others that distances him from his own family. Because at home, this ability was never seen as a choice. It was seen as an obligation. Do you recognize this? That moment when you realize you've spent your whole life being praised for a quality that actually stemmed from a need for emotional survival. That's not motivational. That's unsettling. Because it changes everything you thought you knew about who you are within your own family. The great paradox is this: the Libra doesn't distance themselves because they don't love. They distance themselves precisely because they love too much and learned too early that loving in that house meant fading a little each day. And at some point, their body, mind, and entire soul say enough, not with shouts, with distance. Because it's the only language they never learned to use any other way, silent, polite, and yet absolutely definitive. Realizing that your own strength has unintentionally become the reason for your own isolation is one of the most difficult realizations there is. And it is precisely to overcome this kind of contradiction that the digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help the Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, was written. It doesn't promise to erase the past, but it helps you understand why certain patterns of excessive giving take hold and how to begin giving back to yourself a portion of the harmony you have always been able to offer to others so easily. This special access offer won't remain available for long. The link is in the first pinned comment. The last spots under this offer are running out. Click now and begin your journey towards the clarity and genius you deserve. But if the estrangement stems from too much love, does it have to be eternal? That is perhaps the most uncomfortable question of all, because the answer is neither simple nor comfortable. There's a huge difference between distance as punishment and distance as a breath of fresh air. The first stems from accumulated hurt, unspoken resentment, an almost unconscious desire to make the other person feel the same emptiness one felt. The second is something completely different. It's the minimum space necessary for someone to stop existing solely for others and finally begin to exist for themselves as well. The Libra who distances themselves from their family is rarely doing so out of revenge. More often than not, they are trying to discover if there's a version of themselves that doesn't need to be erased in order to be loved. And this discovery, however painful it may seem from the outside, is one of the bravest acts a person can undertake because it means breaking a pattern that may have spanned entire generations of the same family without ever being named. This doesn't mean that a return is impossible. It does mean, however, that it's only sustainable when it happens in a different way than before. Not as the usual peacemaker, swallowing everything to maintain the peace of others, but as a whole person who has learned, even if late, that they also deserve to be included in the very equation of balance that they are so good at building for others. Discovering that there's a version of yourself that doesn't need to be erased to be loved is one of the first steps in any true reconciliation, whether with family or with yourself. The digital book, The 12 Laws of the Universe That Help the Zodiac Sign Overcome Spiritual Envy, offers exercises focused precisely on this moment, learning to include your own voice in the equation of balance that you know so well how to build for others, without guilt and without comparing yourself to those who have never carried the same burden you carry. This access is for a limited time and will not remain available for much longer. The link is in the first pinned comment. In the end, perhaps what we call Libran detachment isn't actually a detachment from family at all. It's a detachment from a role that never fully fit into a single life. The role of the one who solves everything, of the one who single-handedly balances what should be shared, of the one who learned too early that love and sacrifice always came together, as if one couldn't exist without the other. There is something profoundly human in this movement of distancing oneself only to perhaps return changed. because no balance can stand with weight on only one side. And that is exactly what a Libra carries within themselves, even without realizing it. The silent certainty that true balance never comes from those who give everything, but from those who learn, with courage, to also receive. Perhaps these 5 reasons aren't at their core about distancing themselves at all. They're about a process that's older and more beautiful than it first appears, that of an entire sign relearning to include its own presence in the equation it has always so delicately constructed for others. And if you recognized, at some point in this account, a piece of yourself, perhaps that's the quietest beauty of it all. You're not unbalanced. You just haven't yet placed your own weight on the scale. And the day you do, the harmony you've always known how to build will finally include you too. Perhaps that's why, among all the signs, Libra teaches us something that no one learns without experiencing it firsthand. That balance has never been about pleasing both sides. It has always been about having the courage to occupy your own side of the scale as well.